Greetings, my name is Schnella, and I'm going to talk about a little forgotten system in the world of Warcraft. So many of my viewers are twinks indeed, so most of them will already know what this system of item level actually is. This doesn't stop me from telling, however, that there's nothing for you guys to learn as well, but I'm going to be covering the very basics out of the very start first. So, as of the pre-patch of BFA, a lot of raids became a lot harder to twinks, and some of them even impossible. We figured out that our gear was just squished harder than the bosses and carried on with our lives. This was unfortunately not the case. So, I'm going to give you some more detail and background before we actually go into this. So the first thing you have to know is that item level was actually a stat when it comes to lower levels. Now in endgame currently item level is pretty big as well, but in a completely different manner. Item level in endgame means the amount of stats a certain item has. On lower level, however, item level is a stat. It does increase your damage and decrease your damage taken. In fact, I'm going to take an extreme example. An item with no stats on item level 200 would be stronger than an item with stats at item level, say, 50. So, how did this actually become a stat for us? Well, there were a couple of updates to help people solo old content faster, and there were certain formulas introduced as well. But that was just increasing your damage done by a flat amount of percentages, like 4 to 6 times and then 16.5 times, depending on how higher of a level you were compared to whatever you were trying to solo. But there was also something else. You see, the stat squish introduced in WoW's Draenor gave us a certain amount of difficulties. Gear from Karazhan had the same amount, if not sometimes better amount of stats than gear given in Sunwell Plateau. And to try and answer this, they tried to inform this with a new item level system. Basically, whenever your item level, which is equipped full item level, was higher than the base item level, a certain formula kicked in. You get 1% less damage taken per item level above it, and 5/3 more damage done in percentage, so 1.666% more damage done per item level above the base. Now, a very quick example would be back in the olden days, I'm talking about WoW's Draenor and Legion. The average item level of a level 70 was 165. Now I'm being generous because there were a lot of people on 172 and so forth, but I'm going to be saying 165 just to be kind. The base item level was 115. So that equals a distance of 15 numbers. This means you take 50% less damage and you dealt 83.33% more damage. This made us capable of doing quite a lot of dangerous things, like for example 5-manning Sunwell with a group of 70s. It was possible. It was hard, but possible.
Yes! Oof.
Yeah.
Alright, nice guys!
Oh my god!
Hell.
So this item level system did give us the ability to do all that. Of course it was done in the past as well, but that was purely stats that was gaining us, and now we needed that item level buff to make it work. But it worked. BFA changed the system, however. Well, actually it didn't. The problem with BFA is that the system wasn't changed, but the numbers were. What I'm trying to say is there was an item level squish, which means our base item level and our maximum reached item level has become significantly smaller. Our base item level now lies at 80, whilst our highest reached item level, which I can get, is 93. So despite everything being the same system, so everything was squished in the same amount, numerically speaking there would be no difference. The boss would be doing the same amount of percentage of damage against us as we would be doing against the boss. Except item level came in and made a difference there. You see, what they did is they took always the base item level, the base numbers. They didn't look at item level anymore. So what they did was they took, for example, our boss does 100 damage. Our tank has 1000 HP, so our boss does 1/10 of our tank's health every hit. But item level came into power and that 100 became 50 instead, because he takes 50% less damage from the item level. So that means the boss now only does 50 per hit. Now what happened with the squish was the boss originally did 100 damage to us. That is no change, it's 1/10 of our HP. So now we are going into BFA and our base health, let's say the boss now does 10 damage and our base health is 100, so everything was being reduced by 10 folds. So it's still 1/10 of our HP. Except now we're going back into item level and everything was nerfed, and well, our tank only has 13% less damage taken now compared to 50% in the past. So that means that 10 damage is now 9 and sometimes 8 damage. Which means that in the past the boss did 5% of our health and now they do 9%. That doesn't sound like a big difference, except back in the day we already had trouble with everything else as well. This includes the healing done by healers as well, which is being applied to 1.6666%. So bosses take a lot longer to kill as well. A twink back in Legion, let's say they would base damage 1000 DPS. With the item level they would do 1833, let's round it down, 1800. Now the item level is only 13 above the base, which means the basic damage is increased by 21%. So even if we were to take the same numbers just to make it easy, that means their 1000 DPS becomes 1200 and a little bit more, rounding it down 1200. That means you now do only 66% of the damage you used to do back in the day, which already it's a bit different. But the problem is, back in the day item level was needed. Because if you didn't have item level, you would get one shot. And that's exactly what we are experiencing right now. We are getting one shots on our level 70 twinks. If I go to Illidan on my rogue, I get one shots. If I go to Illidan on my warrior, I take 3 hits and I'm dead. And this is something that apparently has been completely out of range for the entire expansion, for Blizzard in general. They have forgotten about this system being in existence. So when they said everything is equally as strong, I remember at the entire start of the expansion there was a lot of backlash about people saying everything is becoming much harder, and they couldn't figure out why, but this was probably the reason why. But we haven't even started yet. There has been a big amount of inconsistencies, a big amount of bugs, a big amount of glitches when it comes to this system in general. Item level right now is a very inconsistent mess, and it's very hard to really see whether the item level is worth it, whether it's not, whether it will be in effect, or whether it won't. And I made a certain amount of... I made a list to show you where it will and where it won't show up. There's more to this than what you're already seeing. In classic dungeons and raids, item level doesn't matter for a level 70. In fact, there's a very big problem there, which I'm going to get into later. Then, if we take into account, we go back to our regular dungeons and regular raids from this expansion. So a level 70 going into Sunwell Plateau, item level matters. A level 70 going into Sethek Halls, item level matters if you go into Heroic. But it doesn't matter if you're going into normal, because it will scale up all the way to the max level, which is in this case level 80. So your base item level would be the same as a level 80, which we can't reach. So item level doesn't matter in normals, but it does in heroic. Now, again, this also only works in instant places. So if you go into the outdoor world, item level doesn't exist. There's no reason for it. But in dungeons and in raids and in all those places, it does matter. If you at least go into the right proper amounts. If you're a level 80, then it will always matter when you're instanced. If you're a level 70, it will only matter inside the instances of your raids or heroic current versions, not the normal dungeons. So this is where the system, the forgotten system, currently lies. If I have to confine this into one big sentence, I can do it as follows if you know a bit of the background from the rest of the video. Despite everything being nerfed accordingly, item level was forgotten in this whole equation, which makes a lot of things much harder than what they were intended to be. Now, there is one thing I forgot to cover, so this is recorded after everything else has been recorded. I forgot to cover about the classic versions of everything. When I was talking about classic item level doesn't matter, there was something completely different going on there. There is. As a level 70, your damage to a level 60 target is twice as much. But there's some strangeness going on here, because if I took my level 80 and I went on to a level 70 target, my damage was not doubled, it remained the exact same. If I took that same level 80 and I hit a level 60 target, my damage was 16.5 folded, which is the regular amount of damage it should be increasing for something lower than your current expansion. So I think what happened here is they messed up the amount of numbers. 1 to 60 all was into the same scaling, then 61 to 80 was all in the same scaling, and then 80 and so forth. So I think what is going on is that we are now looked at as a certain amount of levels higher than the previous, rather than just being out of expansion. And for the level 80s, all the way up to level 60, so 61 I mean, we will be doing all the same damage to level 61 as level 69s as we would be doing to a level 79. A level 80 would be doing the same damage to a level 79 as a 61 as well. But us, level 70s, are somewhere in the middle ground, and I think there's something going wrong here, where we are being calculated as a half level above level 60s, doing twice the amount of damage we should be doing. I tested this with item level. Item level doesn't matter at all still. We just do a flat 2 times as much damage to a lower target, to a level 60 target, whilst the level 80 does flat 16.5%, 16.5 times more damage. So there's something very strange going on there, and honestly, I have been trying to contact the game master to get these more sorted out, to try and get my level 70 level to 71 and then down leveled back to 70 to see whether the numbers changed and how much they changed, but so far I have no answer to this, and if I have, I will be putting this in the end of this video, even after all my editing, etc. So you will hear from that, and if it didn't happen, then you will not hear from that. I'm sorry. Anyway, there you go, and I'll see you next time. And I'm going to talk about a little system that Blizzard well, let's try that again. So my attack of 1000 DPS onto my target would be... my attack of 1000... You know, I'd like that attack, having an attack of 1000 DPS. I'm okay with that. So if I were to take my level 70 and I entered a certain dungeon, then my item level would be... Oh, shut up!